over to you, Dot. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. And thanks very much for the invitation to speak to the SIG. Again, I have spoken a few times before. In fact, I think this might be my 407th presentation at something, if my counting was correct. But I'm delighted to be back with the SIG, and it's so lovely to see that the SIG is still going strong. So I'm going to talk about how we started 35 years ago, what testing was like then and what it's like now, and what about the next 35 years. So the SIGIST was actually started with a meeting in London on the 27th of January, 1989 at Imperial College. It was organized by Jeff Quentin. We had about 30 people there at the first meeting. I joined the committee as a speaker finder and helped to find speakers for other meetings. And we weren't actually part of the BCS initially. We joined the BCS later on. We had 4 full-day meetings a year. We had a small expo of maybe 3 or 4 tool vendors. And we also did have vendor talks, because back in those days, you couldn't look on the internet if you wanted to find out about anything. So if people wanted to know about tools, they would either have to schedule a visit from them by calling them up or whatever. And it was sort of information really about tools at that time. We produced printed booklets for all of the meetings that we had. And I had quite a collection because I used to go to, I didn't miss very many, especially in the first 20 or 30 years or so. And I actually donated my collection. We downsized 5 years ago, and I couldn't keep them, so I donated them to the BCS. I did call them and ask them if they still had them or what happened to them or if they scanned them. But I think they might have gone in a skip somewhere. If anyone finds them, I'd be delighted to know they're still there. So the meetings we had, we tended to have like a talk about perhaps a technique, a talk about some current hot topic, a talk with a case study and something to do with a tool. And we also had like birds of a feather meetings sometimes. The topics at the very first meeting were risk, reliability, trends for the 90s, and something about a testing standard. So what was testing like back then? Well, it was sort of seen as a necessary evil, which perhaps wasn't really necessary, if thought of at all. I hope that's different now. There were a few training courses, but each one was just put together by the individual based on what they thought. There were no qualifications. There was an attitude that anybody could test. It's not a skilled job. And there were a few conferences or events. The SIGIST, once that started, Unicom also did testing themed conferences, and USPDI, the US Professional Development Institute, did full-blown conferences on software testing once a year in Washington, DC. And the STAR conferences were started in 1992, Software Test Analysis and Review. And that's where the Eurostar conference came from, but more about that later. There were a few tools around, a few commercial tools, but they were fairly expensive. And I need to tell you about what happened to me. I was gathering information for the CAST report, which was a list of testing tools available, which was published in 1991. And I went around expositions of development tools, and I would say, well, what support does your tool offer for testing? And I came up to this one guy, and he said to me, "Madam, if you use this tool, you don't need to do any testing." Well, needless to say, we had a rather full and frank discussion at that point, and neither of us changed the other one's mind. Development back then was mainly waterfall, with testing mostly manual and ad hoc and squeezed in at the end. No, actually, it was more often squeezed out at the end. And of course, the other major difference from then and now is that the systems that we were testing were a lot less complex. So at the risk of embarrassing myself, I will show you a picture of myself back in the old days at my desk. Never mind the specs, look at this computer. It's green screen, text only. On the left, you have a floppy disk drive, and on the right, you have a floppy disk drive. One of them held the word processor, which I think was WordStar, and the other one held the document I was editing. That was me developing training materials back in the 90s. And then I got a new computer. Oh, I was excited about this. It was an Apple Macintosh SE30, and it had a Motorola processor, and it had 40 megabytes of disk and 2 megabytes of RAM. What's in your phone? Yeah. Mine has got, I think, 128 gigabytes. That's uh, it's over 3,000 times more storage. And the cost of this computer, oh yes, of course it was a black and white screen. The cost was nearly £6,000 today. So it costs 10 times less, the phone, and has 3,000 times more storage. That's where we've come in the last 30, 35 years. That's astounding. What's going to happen in the next 35? I just cannot imagine. I couldn't have imagined then what we have now. But the main difference was there was no connection to the outside world, no internet, no email, no mobile phones. So it was very different. And even though I was there at the time, it's hard now to imagine how different it was. So if we wanted to know something, how do you find out? Well, back then we had books. I love books. I've got lots in my bookcase. But there weren't that many books, and everyone had read the same ones, so we could discuss about what people had said, and it was quite good, really. You would subscribe to journals, which came in the post, and weekly computer magazines, which also came in the post, printed ones, and you'd find out things in those. You might go to the library and read other journals that you didn't subscribe to, and you could get a reprint of particular articles, which you would either pick up at the time or would be sent to you by post. And you might make a phone call to find out about a tool, for example, and they would send you some printed documents. You might go on a training course, and you might attend a conference or an event in person. There was no such thing as online. So what's it like now? Need I say more? Well, of course, this is such a rich thing. Podcasts, videos, social media. It's just so different now. It really is. And you can go on a training course, which can either be in person or online. You can attend a conference in person or online. I wonder if people still read books. I sort of hope so, since I've written a few. So how did the SIGIST help testers when it started back in the day? The one thing that everyone who came to a SIGIST meeting for the first time, their reaction was always the same. Oh, there are other people who like testing. I'm not alone. There was no web, no social media. And it was just so affirming and so supportive to have other people who also love testing and be able to talk about things that, people who were in testing understood. It was a focus for sharing stories, tips, knowledge, problems, getting solutions from other people who may have had similar problems, networking with other testers, making friends. I've made lifelong friends through the SIGIST with various people, some of whom I see in the room. Hello, Neil. And the SIGIST also became a model for European testing groups, something I found out later. Major initiatives in the 90s, the first European Software Testing Conference, and a standard for software testing. Back in those days, the 90s was very much standards are the things, quality management systems, but there were no standards for testing except for something for very minor white box testing for safety critical systems. So writing standards for testing was something which was considered to be fairly important at the time and still is important in many areas. And the SIGIST has always been run by volunteers and has been reasonably priced to attend. So starting Eurostar, that was exciting. The first Eurostar was in 1993, and the SIGIST was the host organization. Without the SIGIST, I don't think we would have had a European testing conference. Well, we might have had one, but it wouldn't be the same as it is now. And the reason it was able to go ahead, SQE, who did the STAR conferences, wanted to run a conference in Europe and realized that they probably wouldn't be successful without liaison of people on the ground. So they worked with us, but their financial support enabled it to go ahead. The SIGIST didn't have a great pot of money, but they were a commercial organization and they underwrote the conference. If it had made a loss, they would have taken the loss. Fortunately, it made a profit, so they got the majority of the profit share. And people in the UK did the bookings and marketing and so on. And I'd like to point out that we came up with the name before the train, although only just. So here's the brochure for the first Eurostar and the second STAR conference. And if you look on this as a promotional thing, there are telephone numbers. There is no internet, there is no email. So if you wanted to find out about it, you'd phone somebody up and they'd send you something in the post. And one of the things we did, which I really thought was great fun, was the SIG produced these little things. Here it is. I still have mine. It says, "Testing is fun" on the tie. Anybody else still have one? I hoard things. So what was testing like now compared to what it was then? Well, now I think and I hope it is recognized as a good career choice, a good something which is, this is something which is respected now to be in, and it's also recognized as being necessary. There's lots of training around, live, online. There are lots of books. There are lots of qualifications. ISTQB is one, which again, the SIGIST was involved in starting qualifications for testers, initially with ISEB, part of the BCS, but there are many others as well. And there are many events in testing, international, local, web-based, from major conferences to informal meetups in a pub. And lots of people are meeting other testers and talking to other testers. And the SIG has always been a focal point for that in the UK. The tools, well, now there are still commercial tools. They're getting far more sophisticated, but there are also lots of open source tools. And we don't do waterfall development anymore. Well, it's not many people do or don't admit it, but it's more agile. So testers are part of teams. There's more testing knowledge within the teams, I hope. And there's lots of automated testing with pipelines. But we always will still need human testing. I don't like the term manual testing because that's manual work has connotations of people, very much unskilled. And I have a feeling, I'm not sure if this is right or not, but I have a feeling that a tool vendor somewhere decided to call it manual testing because that sounded derogatory. It should be human testing. It should be intelligent testing. It should be critical testing. So, but we still need lots of human testing. And of course, the major difference is that the systems we are now testing are very different. We have the internet, we have mobiles, we have Internet of Things, machine learning, large language models, artificial intelligence. Yes, have you heard of that? It's everywhere, isn't it? I noticed on the news this morning, in the BBC News, there was a story of an AI system that McDonald's was using for ordering. And it turned out that somebody had 7 cups of tea added to their order en masse. Someone was asking for a particular flavor of ice cream and instead got piles of pats of butter. And someone else had said they wanted ice cream and they said, do you want bacon on that? So is AI the answer to everything? I don't think so. I was at Eurostar last week. It was great to be back at Eurostar. I missed it the year before. And I went on a tutorial about artificial intelligence. And here's what the prompt that was put into Gemini, which is similar to ChatGPT. Please take the perspective of a test manager at Google. What would be your responsibilities? And this is what it replied. As a test manager at Google, can you see it? What on earth is going on here? I didn't request this in Klingon, but it appears to have come out in Klingon. So artificial, yes, but intelligent? I'm not so sure about that. So I think testing with AI, we certainly need different approaches to test AI. Testing with AI, using AI in testing may well be useful. And testing around AI is probably still testing as we've always known it. Those were the things I got from the Eurostar. So what has changed? Well, we have a growing profession, certainly. From a few books to lots of books, from being seen as an unnecessary evil to a respected profession, from none to international qualifications, from testers to specialisms within testing. And what has not changed? Technical, of course, the changes have been enormous. From mainframes to mobiles, cloud, ChatGPT, AI, from homegrown utilities, which is what testing tools used to be called. My first job, I was asked to write a program to execute tests. So I was actually writing a tool, but it was just called a utility. And commercial and now free tools. From kilobytes to gigabytes to terabytes to petabytes, from books, posts to blogs, videos, social media. and from turnarounds to continuous integration. Do you know what a turnaround was? Back in the day, in my first job, it was a punched cards, and you took your punch card deck down to the computer entry room where you logged in a job, and then they would queue it up and run it when its turn came, and you would get a printout with the results, maybe that day or maybe the next day. If you were really lucky, you might get 2 turnarounds in a day. Can you imagine now people being only allowed to compile their programs twice a day? Again, that has revolutionized the way software is developed. But what hasn't changed? Well, I think testers' greatest asset is always and always will be the tester mindset, thinking of what could go wrong. Testing is still testing, and people are still people, and relationships with people are important in testing, as they are in any job, but perhaps more important in testing because we are critics. New technology, certainly constant change then, and testing will always follow the technology. Managers don't understand testing. That still seems to be the case in many cases. I know there are exceptions, but as a general rule, I don't know. Testing is seldom taught at university. Again, there are very good exceptions. And tools are seen as a panacea. And now, of course, AI is seen as a panacea. And people new to testing don't know much, and lots of people are new to testing. So what about the future of testing? Well, testing will always be needed, but it will take different forms. It's more collaborative now, not so confrontational. There's more monitoring, analytics, A/B testing. For AI, the way that you test that is quite different. There's adversarial testing is one of the things I talked about last week, and using partial oracles. You don't know if it's right, but you know if it's wildly wrong. And that's maybe the only thing that you can do in testing some of these large language models. Early detection and defect prevention, that would be good. But nowadays, I wonder whether actually people are more likely to just ship it and fix it and back it out if it doesn't work. That's not convenient for the people who suffer the consequences. And if it can't be backed out, there are still stories in the press about outages that really shouldn't happen. And another thing which really bothers me is the fact that in the UK, in the law, a computer is right until proven wrong. Surely it should be the other way around. And that's the what happened with the post office. So the essence of testing, what could go wrong? What if it isn't? Have you thought of this? That tester mindset, that will continue because that is necessary. That is what we bring to the table. That is how we enable things to be found early before they go out to the users and make better quality systems, or help the developers make better quality systems. And automation, certainly automation is here to stay and is necessary, but it's not sufficient. And I wonder whether people have forgotten the fact that we need structure to the automation, even if we're using open source tools. Just getting a tool is not automation. There's more to it than that. You need to build, whoever's going to be using the tools need to have a good way to get into it. And some of the modern tools have good interfaces, but then you're locked into that tool. And automated chaos, if your testing is chaos, if you automate it, it's still just faster chaos. The tools only run stuff. They don't do testing. Testing is thinking. Testing is what if could go wrong. Testing is critical. Testing takes a lot of effort. Testing takes a lot of experience. That is what testing is. So the future of testers? Will we be out of a job because the developers now test so well? I don't think so, really. Maybe because AI has taken over everything. Again, I think where AI is now is people are now just beginning to realize the limitations of it. And in fact, I have a car which has some artificial intelligence in it. I bought it because it had it. It has adaptive cruise control. I love cruise control. And when it's doing the job it's been designed for, it's great. If I'm going down a road which is fairly empty, I set it at the speed limit and I know I don't have to keep checking it because I know I'm still at the speed limit. If there's traffic ahead, which is going slower than me, as I come up behind it, it slows down, even stops if the traffic ahead is stopped. But if the traffic ahead is actually stopped, it doesn't realize it's stopped and it brakes far too late. I did that once, but only once. So it doesn't do that well. It doesn't work well at roundabouts. If a car is turning off into a side road, I know it's going to be gone in 2 seconds, but the AI waits until it's actually gone and then says, oh, let me think about this for a minute. Oh, yes, the car is gone. Now I will go. So it works well for some things, but it definitely has limitations. And some of them, it seems to me, are dangerous. And I think the same for other AI things. So the tester's role, we are perhaps, hopefully now, quality advisors rather than quality police. Collaborative and agile teams, but keeping those tester skills. Yes, the tester's job seems to be getting more technical because a lot of testers now are having to write or wanting to write automation code. But the idea that all testers should be able to write automation code, I think, is wrong. There are some people who are happy to be testers and automators, and that's absolutely fine. But if people want to just be testers and aren't technical and don't want to write code, they should not be regarded less and said, you're not really a proper tester if you don't write code. And I think there's a real danger that we will actually not just undervalue, but lose the skills of testing if they are not valued. So that's one thing which I feel very strongly about, and I hope that we will be able to preserve the view of testers, which has been hard won over the years, that we do bring a lot of value to the table. So concluding, congratulations to the SIG for 35 years. That's absolutely wonderful. The support and community of testers is very important. It is what helps us all do our jobs better. Technology will always change, but testing will always be needed, and testing by humans will always be needed. And testing is a great career. I've certainly enjoyed my career in testing, unexpected though it was. And I wish all the best to all of you at the SIG for your careers in testing. And I hope there's time for some questions.